Yes, please.
Yeah. Hello all. Good afternoon, good evening to all. My name is Amb Dr, and I'm one of the organizers of this EU-India People Summit. And it started on 1st of May, and it will last until 8th of May. The idea of this summit is to have exchanges between the people from Europe and India, and involving intellectuals, parliamentarians, social activists, and in general people. And why we are doing is also because the official summit, which is scheduled on 8th of May, is closed to civil society. So this is our way to make it more accessible. And so today is the third day of a summit, and the next session that we have is Transnationalism and Solidarity. And I would request Nidhi Trehan to take this forward and take the session ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anubandh, and thank you everybody for joining us here in the United States. It's very early in the morning, and for y'all it's in the evening or early afternoon or late afternoon, early evening. And this has been an exciting array of speakers already. And today we are going to be talking about transnationalism and solidarity. Given the importance of the global Indian diaspora and also the current events which we're facing, I felt it was very important to have a small moment of silence to begin with, and then I will go into the panel. But this is to really honor all the families and the folks back in India who have suffered because of the pandemic and the structural issues actually that have led to a humanitarian crisis in India today. So I'd just like to begin with a small moment of silence to honor all the people who we have lost. So thank you, everybody. And I'd like to welcome our wonderful panelists here today who've joined us. Shawintala Banwarie, who is representing, I would say, a really innovative form of feminism in the diaspora in Holland, and Dr. Bedabrata, who is a scientist and a filmmaker and a social activist, and Ambassador Malay Mishra, Dr. Mishra. So I'd like to just share a few things with you about the panel. So the solidarity with which the transnational diaspora is viewing right now the situation in India, this is sort of front and center of our panel today, given the emergency crisis in India. But I would also like to welcome everybody to talk about their specific experiences within the diaspora and what you think are the most important and salient points to raise about transnationalism in particular. How does transnationalism operate? How do you think the diaspora would be best able to give their inputs and contributions for the building of transnationalism and transnational solidarity. So those are some of the topics that I just wanted to open up with. And I think, Ambassador Mishra, we're going to start with you. Ambassador Mishra belonged to the Indian Foreign Service and was posted to France, Senegal, Mauritius, the United States, Iran, Germany, Seychelles, Trinidad and Tobago, as well as Hungary and Bosnia-Herzegovina. As the head of mission in the last 3 postings, he represented India in its multifaceted dimensions. While paying a good deal of emphasis on economic diplomacy, he equally promoted India's culture and heritage, yoga and Ayurveda. Among his many assignments at headquarters, he looked after policymaking in the then Overseas Indian Affairs Ministry, which gave him broad exposure to handle the ubiquitous Indian overseas community and leverage their connection with the motherland in multiple ways. A career diplomat, Ambassador Mishra is also a research scholar and a visiting faculty and calls himself a, quote, global citizen by design. He has been a motivational speaker at several forums, both in India and abroad, and spoken extensively on diverse subjects. So Ambassador Mishra, without further ado, please start with your opening comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nidhi. Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, while welcoming other panelists, we have been together in our research project on when I was doing my research in Budapest as part of my knowing more the diaspora. And I took up a subject which was very, very close to my heart, namely the marginalized people, studying the marginalized peoples. And I did a comparative work on the Dalits in India and a counterpart community called the Roma, who are equally ubiquitous like the diaspora in Europe, in America, in Russia, in Turkey, practically all over the world. And they happen to also originate from India. And that was my first point of fancy for them. And then I pursued my research. But with this small introduction, I must say that I have been associated with the diaspora in the contemporary Indian diaspora for a number of years, while I was serving in the Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs, which unfortunately is no longer there. This ministry was wound up. I joined this ministry in 2004. And we together set up this. This was a new ministry. We carved it out of the Ministry of External Affairs, of which I was a part. It was a division formerly. It's called the NRI division. And then we constituted this ministry out of this division. And it ran for a number of years. We did a lot of projects together. And that was, I thought, the first point of contact for global Indian diaspora with India through this institutional structure which we developed. Unfortunately, around 2015-16, it was wound up by a decision of the government. Since this is a curtain raiser for the governmental summit, this people summit, what we are going to have, or rather having, I suggest we could flag a few points which could perhaps be carried across by the organizers in some way to the agenda of the governmental summit. And the first point which I would mention is, if the government, as Dr. Trehan mentioned, if the diaspora today, the far-flung diaspora, and a diaspora which has been very, very strong and which has amassed a lot of critical mass in so many countries, which we see particularly in the developed world, as also in places like Southeast Asia, many countries, Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Thailand, as well as in Middle East, in many countries there, particularly in Dubai, and in other parts of the world also, in Africa. So if they have developed a critical mass, and given this current situation which we are facing in India, I'm speaking to you from India now, and I face this kind of humiliating scenes of death and the dying, and it is a torture. It is a torture for the living also. to see all that happening in India today, and to dissect this, to diagnose this. It is another exercise. But let us now concentrate on what the diaspora could do, because what is diaspora after all? A diaspora is a transnational entity. And when you say transnationalism, basically you are talking of the diaspora only, because I would say definitionally they are the same. I mean, diaspora, another definition of diaspora is that it's a population which is deterritorialized and deracinated and transnational. So if you are talking of a transnational solidarity, I think it will mean the same thing as generating solidarity within the diaspora and outside of the diaspora towards the mother country. Here, the mother country obviously is India. And what is happening in the India would give cause for the diaspora to feel alarmed, and not only feel alarmed, but have a sense of perhaps justice and perhaps a sense of goodwill to contribute their might, whatever they can, contribute their scientific prowess, their financial strength, their abilities to contribute in some way to the cause of their mother country, which is going through such tremendous suffering now at this point of time. So the question which Dr. Trehan posed, and I would go with that, is that how can the diaspora help engage with India in this great moment of crisis, what we are seeing today? Well, I would say that, when I used to be in the Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs, and as I mentioned, we had built up a few institutional structures. First, of course, was the ministry itself, the Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs. It was acronymed MOIA, that was in short. And we had minister who had a cabinet rank minister who was reporting to the Prime Minister, and he was the point man for the diaspora from all over the world, and to come visit him, to talk to him, to interact with him. And he used to be very mobile. He used to go out to many countries in the world to see what the diaspora is doing, how they want to involve themselves with India's development, etc. Now, along with that, we also built up a few, institutions. For example, at the time we had like Overseas Indian Facilitation Center, which was like, for overseas investments, particularly financial investments in Indian, industrial development. It was a kind of a window, and overseas Indians could come in and they could go. It was like a one-stop window with this ministry had set up. That was a very important element, and that ran for some time. And a lot of people were very enthused to come in and support India's development schemes at that time. But however, that also has fallen into disuse now. What I'm saying is, what are the institutional structures left in India where the diaspora can come in? Because the obvious question for all of us here is, how can the diaspora help support India? In what way? How can they use the mechanism of the government of India to go deeper into understanding and helping out people out here who are facing these tremendous problems? The other was one India Development Foundation. It was a very, very important foundation because it was geared towards various aspects of India's development. That also has been defunct now. Another very important was a PM set up a Global Indian Council, which grouped prominent diaspora leaders from various parts of the world who came twice a year. They met twice a year, one during this annual event called the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, which was an annual diaspora meet, which is now happening once in 2 years. It's become biennial, and that also the popularity of that event has been waning very, very. Unfortunately, it's been going down and down. People are no longer enthused in coming to this event. Earlier, there was huge participation. I have myself organized 3 of these events during these time when I was there, but this also has now not been working. And most importantly, I would say there was a thing called a G Inc., which stood for the Global Information Network of Knowledge. Because we in the diaspora know very well, there's a lot of reservoirs of knowledge which could be tapped, particularly in developed countries. Dr. Trehan could be a very distinguished representative of a knowledge person, of a knowledge, being a intellectual and a part of the academia of the United States. And there are many, thousands and thousands of such people in the USA, in the UK, in Australia, in Canada, in various parts of the Europe. And now we are talking of Europe here. And I'm sure there'll be many people here who would be, who could contribute the knowledge to a knowledge network if it was there. Unfortunately, that also has gone. I'm giving you these examples to just let you know that at this point of crisis, there is no particular diaspora related cell. There is a small setup called the Overseas Indian Affairs Cell in the Ministry of External Affairs, partly run by a secretary. The secretary is the highest ranking officer of the government of India, and he has other responsibilities besides attending to diaspora matters. In other words, the diaspora has been shortchanged, and there is nothing, no particular institutional structure in India today which would cater largely to the needs and the demands of the diaspora. So that is one point which could be flagged through this meeting, perhaps, in let the leaders know that is the situation. I must tell you at the same time that when our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, when he was very actively going out to various countries in the world as part of his getting to know world leaders and interacting with them, there is a kind of a diplomacy. It's a part of our India's diplomacy to gain strength and leverage in the global community. And the Prime Minister was very active at some point of time. He has traveled to more than 60-70 countries in the world. And in many countries there has been huge responses from the diaspora in those countries. He has given...
Yeah, Ambassador Mishra, I was just going to say that we were going to do the opening with like just a 5-minute introduction. And now we want to, sort of go on. So if you want to wrap up the introduction, then we're going to go into the sort of more developed subjects. Yeah.
So my introduction is basically that if you got to have activism in the diaspora, which one must, how do you channelize this activism? What are the means of communication with India today in the contemporary society? How do we generally channelize this activism into productive, usage of diaspora strengths? How do you leverage diaspora strengths in today's situation in India? So this is the introductory remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Mishra. And now I'd like to turn to Shawintala Banwarie. And Shawintala is a Suriname Hindustani activist who has widely spoken out against Hindutva, institutional racism in Holland, and against Islamophobia. She also participates in interfaith Hindu-Muslim dialogues. And last year, she co-founded the Desi Solidarity platform in Holland, together with a Dutch Pakistani politician. Their goal is to create a voice for the Dutch Desi communities in Holland, speak out against institutional racism and discrimination, and promote communal harmony. So thank you, Shawintala, for joining us. And please, let's start with your introduction here.
Thank you for introducing me. So yes, I'm Shawintala, and I think that transnational solidarity, it means that it's a type of solidarity which goes beyond ethnic and religious lines. And by engaging with people all over the world, we create more opportunities and we broaden our knowledge. I think that transnational movements can be built when various people identify with each other and act as part of the same battle for a radical democracy and for equal rights. If we want to reach that, we need to bring together people from different groups, such as political parties, anti-racist movements, civil society organizations, the media, academia. There is a lot of variety between members of the Indian diasporas. For instance, I'm from the Suriname Hindustani diaspora, but my story, my experience is totally different than that of Indians in the UK and Indians in America. So we are very distant from each other, and there can be huge differences. So I think that our task should be to search for a common good. That is a common struggle or a common resistance to which we all can relate to. Think of, let's say, for instance, equal rights for minorities, how to deal with discrimination, racism at schools, racism at universities. And in search for a common good, it would be an idea to frame the incidents so that not only Indian activists would feel attracted to these issues, but also people from other nations and other cultures. An example, the arresting of Sarjil Imam and other activists can be seen as a disgrace for Indian secularism, but we can also frame it as an erosion of activist freedom and as a threat to the rights and freedoms of not just the Indian activists and minorities, but on all the minorities all over the world. So if people from an Indian minority cannot enjoy equal rights, then no minority in the world will be totally free. So an attack on an Indian minorities is an attack on minorities elsewhere. So it will be also an attack on the rights of the Indian diasporas living in the West. And I think it would be also important to engage with people from different cultures, different religious backgrounds, who are engaged in different forms of activity. And I think by doing so, the transnational movement bypasses the traditional distinctions and the different struggles of different diasporas. And then we can merge all those different struggles into one, that is the search for and battle for social change and for global justice. That was my introduction.
Thank you, Shawintala. It was really, I think it encapsulates so much of what we are trying to really, muddle through today, both the so within the diasporic groups, the solidarity that you're building, the networks you're building, and like you said, the networks to fight institutional racism, particularly in Europe. And, I have worked for a long time with the Romani diaspora, which of course their ancestors left the South Asian, the subcontinent, sometime maybe around 1000 AD. So that's perhaps one of the oldest Indic diasporas in Europe today. The other issue you raised, which was about the inter-diasporic solidarity. So amongst the distinct, the very different and diverse diasporas, and how to build that framework of solidarity. And I think in the next segment, we're going to go into the mechanisms of building the inter-diasporic solidarity. I think that would be very powerful because, again, operating in a kind of transnational sort of network, a sphere of transnational networks is very different, from within the particular country, the solidarity that you're building inside of a particular country. Yes. And now I'd like to, thank you. I'd now like to introduce Bedabrata, and I would start by saying that I believe Bedo is a sort of a Renaissance human, and one of the inventors of the CMOS, digital image sensor technology. And so this is the scientific hat that enabled the digital camera revolution from cell phones to movie cameras. Dr. Pine holds over 90 patents and is an inductee to the US Space Technology Hall of Fame. He was an award-winning senior research scientist at NASA and Caltech for over 15 years, till he quit NASA to become a filmmaker. And so now in the creative side and social activist side, and with his debut film Chittagong, which was released in 2013, he won 4 Indian National Awards, including the prestigious Golden Lotus as the best first film and the best debut director, as well as awards in several international film festivals. He is currently working on a number of feature films, documentaries, and web series. Thank you, Dr. Pine, for joining us all the way from California, and it's super early there. So thank you so much for waking up early and joining us on this forum.
Thank you, Dr. Trehan. Thank you. Yes, I am just barely trying to keep my eyes open. It's also because last evening there was a big program here that where we celebrated the elections in Bengal, which was actually much watched election. So I'm still trying to get by with my coffee. So thank you for the introduction. Let me jump into the topic. I think it's the question of transnationalism. It's a very broad topic, and I think in one sitting we can't do justice to it. But since we're talking about diaspora, if we start from there, well, there are 36 million or so of what one calls NRIs, or people of Indian origin, in this in all over the world. That's a large number, and the amount of wealth they also bring. For me, I have been in the US for bigger part of my life than I've been in India. But all the while, I have always, even though I've been outside India for all these years, I'm very directly connected with India. And I think that's true for many of the diaspora. But the question is, do we become visible only when there's a crisis in India, or when there's a Howdy Modi event, or there is an investment opportunity? Or do we play a much bigger role in what ails India's polity, India's economy, multifarious problems it faces, this attack on rights that are happening on an extended scale, the question of media freedom, the question of various struggles that are going on, for instance, the farmers' protests at this time, or for instance, what's going on in Bastar. Where do we stand with respect to all of these? So, I mean, as Ambassador Mishra said, very correctly said, how can we help India? But that only raises a question, what is India? It may seem like a facetious question, or almost an anti-national one, but actually there is an important part to it, because increasingly we are seeing, and this is not just in India, in every country, there is an official country and there is a people, and their interests are diverging. So I think if I were to title my comments, I would say, what's in an N, the letter N. And the point I'm trying to make is that whenever we talk about India, we always talk about India, rarely about Indian. And so let me come to this point, but I think we must understand where this question of transnational is coming from today. That the backdrop essentially, which is that the world international liberal order that was set in place, say after the World War II, that's kind of under huge pressure. I mean, just a simple thing. One of the major institutions of this liberal order, UN. In 2020. There were 17 resolutions in the UN General Assembly against criticizing Israel, the maximum that happened with a single country. And yet, you can go and ask Palestinian how much that had helped them. So this is the crisis of liberal international order that we are going through. On the other side, we have neoliberalism and globalization, where we have these huge organizations, from TPP and NAFTA to political alliances like OAS. President Obama brought in Asian Pivot. Now you have this thing called Quad. Though from the Rush Hour movie, I thought Quad was a bad thing. But anyways, leaving that aside. Then there is Belt and Road Initiative, ASEAN, all of these. But all of these are government organizations. They're government institutions. Where are the people's institutions? Alongside, you have the rise of transnational companies. For instance, today the top 5 TNCs each have market capitalization that's larger than the 15th highest ranked GDP. That's about $1.1 trillion. And just as the growth of these corporations and the super rich has happened, so has been the poverty in the world. Today, top 20 billionaires have as much wealth as bottom 3.8 billion people. So, an interesting part of this globalization, oh, by the way, I mean, it's not that TNCs are something foreign to us. If you look at Ambani's, Tata's, Mahindra's, Adani's, they're also operating on a world scale, not just within India. One of the issues that comes up in this very, very clearly is that in today's world, when capital is supposed to transcend all boundaries, every kind of limitation is put on people and their mobility and their organizing together. It's very interesting that capital is free to move, and they will talk about, oh, I mean, barriers should be gone, but then they would erect every kind of barriers for people to connect. Like, for instance, in India today, how much can an Indian go and sit down with their Kashmiri counterpart and ask, what exactly are you, what's your complaint? Is there avenues available? In fact, if you were to do that, today you would be called an anti-national and can be even put in jail. You have a situation today where a prime minister can go to Pakistan and make a deal. But if a people's organization, let's say an Indian people's organization and a Pakistan people's organization, want to sit together and say that we oppose war, we want to de-escalate war, we want to have an anti-war situation, that might even be called anti-national. So where I'm coming to is that there is no taking the word transnational forward without rendering the word national. And I think that's one of the things that is under huge stress all over the world. What does it mean to be national? And I will talk about that and probably go into the discussion in greater detail later on. But I think the main point I'm trying to make is that today, all over the world, right wing, which has taken the mantle of nationalism, so to say, I believe what they have taken the mantle on is that of chauvinism. And there is a very big difference between chauvinism and jingoism on one hand, and patriotism and nationalism on the other. And when we talk about chauvinism, what is it? It promotes, it wants and proclaims to be the greatest. I mean, you have heard this. Like even just the other day, since we are talking about COVID deaths and as hard, gut-wrenching these are. You remember in January in Davos, the world's largest economic forum, our prime minister was going and boasting that, oh, we have conquered COVID and the world should follow our model. So this notion that we are the best is the essence of chauvinism. It promotes subservience to institutions, especially the military. Proudly proclaim and magnify the smallest achievement of individuals, create false narratives, false hopes, creates a slavish mentality, justify use of force against critics and non-conformers in personal, social, cultural sphere, political sphere, and actively silence critics. This is the sum total. I mean, I think there are way more where chauvinism comes in and which is presented as nationalism. Because on this basis, you kind of try to create a common identity, suppress dissent, demonize those who are on the outside, and create this either you're with us or against us mentality, stop discussion. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I think that's also an important point to realize, the left liberal, from that side, also has very correctly denounced this kind of chauvinism, jingoism, this herd mentality, parochialism, racism, xenophobia, whatever you would call it, all that this chauvinism engenders. But I believe they have also fallen for the trap set by the right wing and wrongly called it nationalism, and then reduced nationalism to identity issues only. I think, sorry?
Oh. No, I was just saying, yes, I agree.
Yeah, so I'll finish right away. I think the main point I'm trying to make is the fundamental point about nationalism is not about identity. It's not. It's about organizing the economy and polity to meet the material and spiritual needs of people. Like if you actually go back to our freedom struggle, our national struggle, what was it about really? Was it just that we were being ruled by the British? Or was it that we were deprived of using our resources to our ends? And in this regard, one must remember the words of Bhagat Singh, who said, our struggle will continue so long as there is exploitation. It doesn't matter whether the exploiters are of foreign origin or mixed domestic and foreign or purely domestic. So the focus about nationalism is about its people who constitute it, about their well-being, about their uplifting their lives, uplifting their spiritual life. And yet today, nationalism, or those who are in power, are using nationalism as an identity to maximize the profit of a handful of people. And I think this is the main issue that has come to the fore. That shall the country, and this is a very broad question that affects every single country, that should a country's economy and polity be organized for the maximization of profit or for providing material and spiritual needs of the people? And if we can pick this question up, this would be our nation building. This is where we will give a new meaning to nationalism, and on that basis of creating that change, of creating that positive thing which will be people-centric, that we will connect with everybody. Let me point out that today, all over the world, the reason why a lot of people in the world are looking at India, I'm talking about the farmers' protest, is because the farmers have taken a stand and are not giving up. I think it is in this struggle that we will find the unity amongst the diaspora, as well as with the people of the countries where we live in. So let me stop here, and I think there are.
Thank you. Yes.
That raise, we can go into.
Thank you, Dr. Pine. It was a very, very thought-provoking, just wonderful exposition. And I think your main point about sort of reconstituting what does it mean to be a patriot, what does it mean to be a national, and then centering it to the people, making it a people-centric discourse. I think this is a very important segue into Dr. Mishra now. I'd like to pose some of the questions, I think, in Dr. Pine's delivery just now, if you can sort of build upon, because myself as a sociologist, I have to say, when we look at India from a structural perspective, right, what you're talking about is what are those building blocks of that structure? Who gets to decide, who will decide what are the building blocks of a development of a people, of a community? And so, Dr. Mishra, I'd like you to sort of respond and perhaps build upon some of the comments that Bedo has raised. Thank you. Sorry, you're on mute. Okay.
Yeah, I got on mute. Thank you, Dr. Trehan. I think it's become quite a very interesting discussion at this point, and Dr. Pine has raised a lot of important issues. If I wish to comment on that, I think we are all on the same wavelength. First of all three of us, all three panelists are speaking the same language, basically. The only difference is while the two others are based outside of India geographically, I am within India, and I am a participant observer in a way of this entire drama which is unfolding every day, every minute, every second. I will also say that I was a part of the government not so long ago. Even while the current Prime Minister was the Prime Minister, then I retired in 2015 and he came to power in 2014 as a national leader, as you know. I've had the opportunity of seeing him then and seeing him now outside of the government and seeing what a change, not only the character of the person, but the entire character of the polity has come about in these 7 years of the BJP rule, how they have brought this country to this pass. And what Dr. Pine said is absolutely correct and is actually happening in India. So there is no fictitiousness about it. There is no imaginary about it. And if you were to make a film on this, I'm sure it can't be shown in India. First of all, it will be banned in India. If you wrote a book, again, it will be out of circulation. That is the kind of censorship which is going on day in and day out for free, independent voices. And if the voices are getting more vocal, they are being, caught under this or the other act of the government of India and put in jail. As you would see, many activists today, many journalists today, many freedom-raising voices today are suffering for no fault of theirs, except as they spoke out against certain injustices which they see around them. So one has to tread with a lot of caution, Dr. Pine. And when you are speaking of solidarity, building solidarity, it's easier said than done, because after all, the diaspora went out of India when the situation in India, in terms of these kind of, stability of the social system was far better than now. First of all, as you rightly pointed out, the disparities, the social disparities were not that visible then as they are now. This humongous drive towards privatization in India today, the Modi government running after, privatizing every damn thing in India today has led to immiserization of the highest order, if I may say so. You mentioned about all these billionaires today. India today has the third largest number of billionaires in the world, being one of the poorest economies in the world. You cannot reconcile both. The only way you can reconcile is looking at what is going on in India today. What are they doing? I mean, we saw last year, the first wave of COVID, how wretched our migrant labor, our migrant workers were not getting any transport to even come back home. They were treading, on foot, barefoot, for miles and miles together, and the government was absolutely, indifferent to their plight. And the institutions, you name one institution, army, I would say 10 institutions, starting from the judiciary, the Supreme Court, the High Courts, the Electoral Commission, the ECI, you name it, any institution has been subverted today, has been compromised in some or the other way. So what I'm saying is the scope of the diaspora in being a part of this global diaspora solidarity and in building up the population of India and doing something for them is extremely limited. You have to understand that, first of all. It's good to make a film, it's good to write something, those are diasporic imaginary, you can indulge in that. But when it comes to brass tacks, it becomes very difficult, very, very difficult. I just now told you about, look at a very simple thing, I'm telling you. This has been going on for at least since April. This huge crisis has broken up on India. There has not been a single word uttered by the government of India concerning the diaspora. That can the diaspora come and help their brethren in India? Can they form a cell in India which could interlocute with the diaspora outside? Not one single sentence or not one single word has been said. What does it prove? It proves that India couldn't care less. And you said about India and Indian. Now, of course, that's a very valuable, point which you raised. But at this current juncture, I hardly see any difference between India and Indian. Whosoever is in India is an Indian. Whether I conform to the ideas or the, the values by the government or not, I got to be in that. Otherwise, I'm in trouble. What do I do? In other words, we are moving towards a very, very restrictive structure, a kind of authoritarian structure in which, and Madam Banwarie also mentioned about the rights, about, about the, our rights being, trampled upon and human rights. Yes, that has been an issue. There have been two big bodies, who have castigated India for openly defying human rights, madam. And one body was in fact was a Swedish body, if you know, and the other one was a US body, human rights bodies. What happened? The government of India couldn't care less. They said, these are our internal matters. These don't matter. They don't matter. And they will do what they feel like. So now what I'm saying is, how do you build the new diaspora in the contemporary society to work at the ills, at the evils which has befallen India? How do you do that? That is the point which you need to understand. And how do you work around?
Yes, and can I add one thing? That this is something that, because I'm part of the diaspora here in the United States, but I also lived in Europe and I also lived in India. So I have lived in sort of the three different domains or ecosystems, if you will, of sort of Indian activism. So one thing that I think which is really important is, what are the sort of structural issues involved in India? You mentioned, Malay, about the lack of investment, and we can begin with the healthcare infrastructure, which is catastrophic. You can see it before your eyes, how it's crumbled just like that. Within 2 weeks, it's crumbled. And the other is the educational system. So our education system in India has been privatized, for forever, it seems to me. I mean, from the time of the colonial era to where we had, the convent schools, and then there was kind of an idealistic era, I would say, in the 1950s and 60s, when there was actual investment made in the Sarvodaya Vidyalayas or the Kendriya Vidyalayas, and the sort of government schools improved their standards. But generally, what I have observed, especially in the north of India, where I'm from, is that the lack of investment in education, has resulted in many of the ills that we're now seeing today, with the panic, people not wanting to take the vaccine in India. I've heard statistics that 50% of Indians don't trust the vaccines. So, this is Bedo, you being a scientist, perhaps you can also comment on that. But I did also want to say that for Shawintala, if I can quickly ask you a question, that from your perspective, in Holland, in the Netherlands, building this network, I really, was impressed with the Hindu-Muslim dialogue that's so needed all over the world right now. In fact, in the diaspora as well, not only in India, but in the diaspora. Can you please just share with us, from your perspective, what do you think, what's happening in India and how it's having an impact on the diaspora, and what the diaspora is doing about it, basically? Thank you.
If I may speak from the Suriname Hindustani diaspora in Holland, I think that the situation in India has a huge impact on our Suriname diaspora. I don't know if you have heard about the Suriname Hindustanis, but we don't come directly from India. But during the colonization era, many Indian families, they were being transported to Mauritius, to South Africa, so Suriname. So for us, India is like 4 or 5 generations back, but still many of us still relate to India because we are proud of our roots, of our ancestors. And one of the ways to connect with the Indian country is to, unfortunately for many, is to follow the Indian politics and to be a fan of the BJP, of Modi, because by connecting, being a fan of Modi, they feel as if they are still being part of the Indian culture. And I can see that in the Suriname Hindustani community, there are more tensions between Hindus and Muslims. For instance, here in Holland, we have a very Islamophobic party. Just like BGP in Holland, we have PVV. And I can see that there are more Hindus who are being attracted to this Islamophobic party, political party. And one of the reasons is because of all the fake news, all the propaganda that is coming from India. I can see more Hindus who are being very prejudiced, who are showing a lot of hatred towards Muslims and towards Islam. So it does have a huge influence on Surinamese Hindus. And on the other side, there are also more Hindus who are speaking up, not just me, but also many Hindus in my community who are just fed up with all those Islamophobia. So there's one part which is very progressive and who is speaking out, but there is also a part which is very conservative and who is very sensitive to the propaganda that's being spread from India.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I just want to add, sorry, there's an echo. Is it better? Okay. No, this is exactly the same thing we're seeing in the US and in the UK and Canada. It's across the diaspora that as the motherland is in the throes of sort of Hindu nationalism, Hindutva, chauvinism, it's had a very corrosive spillover effect in the diaspora. It has caused tensions in the diaspora. Yes. So I would completely agree with you because
I think that what.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think that also a major factor is because, like here in the West, we also have a lot of propaganda about Muslims, about Islam. So I think that because of that, the Hindus from the Indian or the Suriname diaspora, they have a double chance of being prone to Islamophobia, because it's not just Modi, it is not just the Indian media, it is our Dutch media here as well, who is portraying Islam and Muslims as some kind of an enemy. And then we have also our history, like many, as you know, many Indian history books, they are portraying Islamic invasions as barbaric and
yes, yeah.
I can see that many Hindus here, they are also very easy to believe those stories because they feel like, okay, we don't live in India. How can we engage with Indian culture? That is by reading the Indian history, because by reading those Indian history books, they feel as if they are still connected to the Indian history and culture. And yeah, that is also
it's a consumption of a very kind of simplistic narrative about India and about the past of India. And so that's a very sort of slippery slope right there. And it's been, it's really been employed, I think, by the current, regime. This pride of the Hindu past and the sort of humiliation of Hindus at the hands of Muslims in the past. And this kind of rhetoric, this kind of narrative has really built up. Beda, would you like to come in and add something about more thoughts based on the previous discussions just now? You're on mute. Sorry, you're on mute. Oh, okay.
Yeah, of course, these are very important and very critical topics today, and there are lots of thoughts on this. But I would begin by saying that I agree with Ambassador Mishra, that we are all on the same page, but that doesn't mean, and what he said, that building a movement, building the actual sort of resistance is that much more difficult. It's not easy. I mean, none of us, I think, are under that illusion that it's going to be an easy job. But I think it's also important to discuss this from this point of view, that in order for action to happen, there is also needs to be a clearing in the space of ideas. And I think one of the pressure that comes on all diaspora is that to show that you are patriotic means to line up behind the government. Whichever the government, whether it's a the Modi government or Congress government or whatever have you. I think this pressure that to identify with India means not to identify with the aspirations and needs of people, but to identify with the official structures is one of the biggest pressures that we face. Like, if you think about it, any Indian would be moved by the plight, say, of people in Bastar. But if you, as soon as you open your mouth, if you are somehow being seen as talking against India, and that's exactly what happens. Or for instance, if you talk about the condition of farmers, you're suddenly being said that, oh, you're a Khalistani. Maybe you are against India. That's the debate, that's the discussion we need to have. We need to put out that, no, it's okay to talk about the interests of Indian people. It's okay. It's not just okay, it's required to talk about what is holding Indian people back. It's important to talk about what official policies, actions, initiatives are pushing Indian people back, whether it's in the denial of rights or whether in policies against farmers and so on. I think that pressure, if we can release, that you are actually a patriotic. In fact, if you are patriotic, your starting point will not be what the officials are saying, what the Indian, those who supposedly are representatives are saying, not what the army is saying, not what the the executive is saying, but talk about what is it that concerns Indian people. If we start from that, that's the most patriotic thing that you can do. And if in order to do that, you come to loggerheads with the government, so be it. So I think that it's important to change the terms of the debate. And that's why I started by saying India versus Indian. And I think this as anybody who has organized here, as even Shawintala, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. I'm sorry about that. That there is this pressure that to connect with your roots means to line up behind the official position of India. And I think that pressure is one of the biggest pressure that we encounter when we try to organize the diaspora here, the so-called NRIs here, because everybody wants to be seen as a good Indian, and a good Indian today, and for a while. I mean, I'm not saying that it happened under Modi itself, but good Indian is who supports the official positions. But I think that time has come for us to put that we start not from the official positions. Official positions will be good, maybe bad. We start from what is it that concerns the Indian people, and that includes everybody. Kashmiris, Bastar, farmers, peasants, women, youth, workers, all of them.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. We have a question for the panelists from Ritu. Ritu, are you here? Can you ask the question, please?
Yes, I'm here, pretty much here. So my question is actually to Dr. Malay Mishra, because you mentioned about that how the Indian government is not it doesn't care what the diaspora has been doing. It doesn't care what whatever we do outside of India, it's immaterial for the government of India. I wanted to ask you then, what should be the role of the diaspora? Because obviously, as Bedabrata has also pointed out, and Shawintala has also pointed out, the diaspora has the willingness to be part of the Indian dialogue. I also recognize it very well that for this current government, at least, the diaspora doesn't form the part of the voter bank that they should be bothered about. Yeah, because we are not voting at all in India. We don't have those rights, right? But at the same time, it does matter if it perhaps does matter on what we do on a policy front outside of India, right? And it does matter to them that how we create the narrative of India, because we have seen the Howdy Modi rallies in the past. So my question to you is that where would you, in your opinion, place the diaspora and suggest that what the diaspora should be doing in furthering their engagement in the coming years?
Thank you for your question. It's a very, very important question. I thought this question will definitely come to me. I was expecting that. But I also am beset with a sense of helplessness when I answer this question, for the simple reason that I don't know the answer. When the diaspora left India, as Shawintala explained in her presentation, her diaspora went from India to Suriname and from Suriname to Holland, double migration here and there. There are many such diasporas have gone. At that time, a diaspora was not very conscious, politically conscious. They were pulled out of India by a colonial regime who needed basically labor from India to work in the plantations, what was euphemistically put as the sugar colonies, the king colonies. So they were part of that. But today's diaspora is very, very conscious. As Dr. Pine very, very accurately put it, is politically conscious. You have grown out of that system of being a part of the ancient diaspora. You are a part of the contemporary diaspora, and you've got to question. You've got to question what is going on in India. And I know there are many leaders from the global Indian diaspora who are writing very, very critical comments on what's going on in India, what we can do, and how we can get to India, how we can get to, things like that. But let me tell you a very simple thing. You will understand the import of the point I'm making. In March 2021, just 2 months back, on the 4th of March, the MHA, the Ministry of Home Affairs, they came out with a circular modifying the status of the so-called OCI, Overseas Citizen of India. I think all of you are OCIs now. You must have all got your OCI cards. Now, the government of India, you don't, okay. You haven't lost much. Well, the government of India in its wisdom said...
I still have my Indian nationality, actually.
I don't have OCI either, by the way, Malayji.
Well, I thought you were an Indian national.
The passport.
Aren't you an Indian national, by the way? So you don't have to...
I used to be until the age of 17. My parents wanted me to decide, even though I came when I was 5 years old to America. My parents said, let her become nearly an adult, and then she decides, does she want to take the US or the Indian, keep the Indian? And of course, by that time, I was very politically active in campus politics in America. So I was like, okay, let me take the American one.
Well, you have taken your course. Well, OCI is the Overseas Citizen of India, which was given in 2005. Actually, I was then at the ministry, and we had worked on it to give some kind of a green card. You can say it's equivalent to a green card. Except for voting rights, the OCIs could do anything in India. They could have a lifelong visa, no questions asked. They could walk in and walk out of India at any time. And so many people got this OCI card. They became OCI card. Now the MHA, they started modifying conditions to the OCI card, saying that there were certain conditionalities attached to it now. What was the conditionality? Suppose the OCI came for doing research, and research could be an omnibus research. You could research in a university, in an institute, you could be a consultant everywhere. You had to take the permission of the government of India. Suppose you came as a missionary, and that happened because of last year's, this famous Tablighi Jamaat case. And that is particularly meant at the Muslim community of India, how they were demonized because of a few Tablighis who they were told that they were the super spreaders. And that went on and on and on. This narrative never stopped last year. And this year, they have 1,000-fold this Mahakumbh, where there are thousands of super spreaders, but no one talks about them, because that is a very sacred thing happening on the banks of the Ganges. So that is a kind of differential which the government has created into the Indian society. And the OCI card just consolidates it, that kind of a government narrative. And the third is you come into India, but you cannot go to certain places which are otherwise restricted. So mountaineering you can't do. And then you cannot travel anywhere and everywhere. So OCIs have got their, their limitations. The government is giving on one hand certain rights to the overseas Indian diaspora, and on the other taking out a few of them by adding conditionalities to it. Just to make the point to Shawintala that, this Hindu-Muslim narrative which is going on in India, which is kind of polarizing Indian society today very badly, fragmented. In fact, we saw that happening in Bengal, where the Bengali electorate refused to be swayed by the polarization narrative propagated by the BJP demagoguery. But it is going on. It is going on in a big way. And it is happening, as you very rightly said, it is impacting on the diaspora also. It is driving a wedge within the diaspora, and quite rightly so. So what I mean to see is the chances of the diaspora at this point working for the Indian people, to answer your point, Dr. Pine, is that you have to do it on a personal networking level. Suppose you came from Bengal, you came from a part of Bengal and you want to go back and help out people out there, please do so. Please do so. Go on your own. Don't expect too much of government support for that, because there is no institutional structure for the government to help you there. For example, farmers' protests. Now, you would be surprised that to sustain the farmers, there's a huge Punjabi diaspora which is supporting them. They are supporting them from Canada, from US, from all over the world. Otherwise, how do you think they are surviving for now 5 months in the open there? They are putting all the funds and all that is happening. And how is it happening? Through their families here in India. So they are sending money to their families, or they are doing the support to the, they are coming out and helping the families. And those families in turn are helping the farmers. And that is how these protest movements are continuing. So to answer the question which Ritu posed, is that, you see, in today's world, the diaspora is left to itself. The diaspora need not expect any governmental support. That is the point I'm making. You've got to see how you can network among yourselves. Building solidarity, global diaspora solidarity. You do it in your own ways. Through internet, communications, travel, tourism, what have you. Sending money home, whatever, your friends, anything. But government part, you should be minimized now. I mean, I'm talking to the current government. The current government, the way it looks at. Otherwise, Mr. Modi goes out in the world and gets adulation from all over, including in the diaspora. Then why doesn't he, coming back home, cater to the needs of the diaspora? I mean,
so Mishra, you've made a really profound point here, and I would extend your point and say that the government it's not that the government doesn't just care for the diaspora, but because we are linked directly to the people, right? And this goes to Dr. Pine's point. The government doesn't seem to care for the people. Do you see what I'm saying? That the voices on the ground, the farmers' voices, currently the people who are suffering from the healthcare pandemic, the system has collapsed. The whole hospital system is overwhelmed. People are dying on the streets as we speak, right? So this is a symptom, or this is a sign, a very deep sign of deep malaise in the current system as we speak. And I think there is now a question from Anubandh. Anubandh, do you want to come in, please?
Yeah, thank you. And I must say that I have been listening to all of you very patiently, and I feel overwhelmed. I feel excited. I would say first that I'm based here in Paris, and I have also worked 2 years in Romania. So this is for Mr. Ambassador for his French and Romanian collection. I think during our discussion, we haven't touched upon 2-3 points. First, when we talk about diaspora, we are considering only the diaspora which is privileged one. which is in United States, which is in Europe. Although Mr. Ambassador mentioned the diaspora which is in Middle East, they have very different conditions. Many of them, their passports have been confiscated, and the working conditions aren't really the same, but they still are part of the diaspora. And I think if we don't make that distinction, we are just continuing with the difference between India and Bharat, So that's first point. Second point, I would say that the question that that Dr. Payne raised, what is Indian, what is being Indian? I think that's also true when we talk about the diaspora. And we have to make a distinction that the diaspora is also pro-Modi and one which is not pro-Modi. So that distinction has to be recognized. And I would say it's easy for RSS and the people who follow that ideology, because there you execute, you don't really question. And that's why to find a common factor between us, the diaspora, is difficult, because we people think, and it's obvious we have differences. Lastly, I will also say that we have to also take into account to what extent the Indian diaspora's engagement is with their host countries here. What point should be of assessment? Are there intermarriages? Is there food sharing? Because Indian diaspora cannot be only committed to India, and it's also their presence here. I have then just few comments and questions, and you can, that's the only time I'm going to talk, and then you can respond. Mr. Ambassador said that the Pravasi meet is no longer working, no longer popular. My question is, what do you think is the reason why that's not happening? And this also brings to another point, that Modi did benefit a lot from the NRIs, and from the diaspora. My question is, what makes now Modi to neglect it? Why the diaspora is not pampered? Why it's not appeased? Let's say, the terminology. What is the reason behind that? For example, there could be demands of dual nationality, voting from distance. Nothing of that sort is taken into account. Then Mr. Ambassador raised a good point that the diaspora, when it left India, the things were relatively better. Today, they are not really that good. And so what would be the trend of diaspora? Will we see more people quitting India in these circumstances? And to you, now the last question, very last question to Ambassador is, how easy now or difficult it is to readjust to India? Because you have been to different places, you have seen different contexts, and how do you emotionally, economically, physically, socially, please, that will be very nice to hear from you. Thank you to all of you.
You're on mute, Malayji, you're on mute.
Okay. Yeah, shall I take these questions? These are all very, very important critical questions.
Yes, we have some time. We have a bit of time, so please, yeah.
Okay, you asked about the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, why it has fallen into complete unpopularity now. Let me give you a concrete example. This year in January 2021, 9th January is the date of the Pravasi, because that is the date held very sacred when Mahatma Gandhi had returned from South Africa after having got his satyagraha, a part of his satyagraha movement accomplished there. So the government of India, in its wisdom, from 2003 has started this Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, which was initially held annually. And over a period of time, the government thought best, the government under Modi thought best to have it once in 2 years, biannually. And then for some time, there was a regional PBD also happening in various parts of the world, where you had, perhaps one was held in Europe. I don't know about Paris, but certainly one was held in California in 2016 or so, a regional PBD, where you had a smaller gathering. For this year's PBD, which is the main PBD in January, while Prime Minister was addressing, and January you didn't have COVID in India. The menace has still not come. They were counted 200 odd people in the audience. Just 240, 50 people in the audience for the Prime Minister's lecture. The inaugural lecture of the Prime Minister, where earlier I have seen thousands of Pravasis gathering at that time. That is the main feature of the Pravasi. Now this year there has been a dismal attendance. Why? What is the reason? Now, my guess is that Pravasis have lost interest in India, number one. There are various reasons for that. They may have detached gradually their ties from India. That is one reason. Secondly, they may have been disenchanted with the policies of the government of India towards them, and they may have distanced themselves from India. Thirdly, they may have discovered that there is no MOIA now, no ministry, no point of contact with the government of India. Suppose something happens to them, where would they go? Nowhere. So why would they come? Why would they waste money and come all the way to India to attend this function? No need. So only those die-hard Modi supporters among the diaspora may have come, you can say, and that too in limited numbers. Now, why, the question which you posed after that why would the government not take advantage of the Pravasis who have supported the government so well in the past? And why would Modi do this, this harakiri towards the Pravasi who have helped, who could help, who has a potential of helping India? Now, my answer is simple for that. Mr. Modi does not tolerate dissent of any sort. Mr. Modi does not quite appreciate intellectuals around him. Mr. Modi does not like scientific advice, does not like expertise, does not like all these things around him. And Pravasis are full of them. They are full of scientists, full of intellectuals, full of experts, and they can go out of their mind to say something which may not suit the government, may not suit what Mr. Modi wants to hear. His acolytes may say in India, but not necessarily the Pravasis. Why would the Pravasis say? So if the Pravasis don't say, why take all the pains to invite the Pravasis? Why take their help at all? Leave out the Pravasis. So now there is a gradual marginalization of the Pravasis in the government of India's thinking. That's my reading. That's my reading, because I am out of the government for the last 5.5 years. I am out, but I can read the mind of the government towards the diaspora. Their behavior towards the diaspora has been on the decline. I must say, progressively on the decline. It is a very nefarious symptom. We built it up brick by brick, our relationship with the Pravasis, with the diaspora, with the overseas Indians, and I see that structure is getting dismantled now. And who to blame for that? Your guess is as good as mine, because we have to see how it can be done. Now, what is the alternative to that? And as I mentioned to Dr. Pine's question, how to build this global solidarity among the global Indian diaspora? Perhaps you have to networking among countries, Pravasis of France, Pravasis of Suriname, Pravasis of the Caribbean, diverse range of Pravasis. Why don't you come together and have a global movement of Pravasis? There is a body called the GOPIO. Dr. Trehan would know, is based in US, is based in New York. A global GOPIO, Global Organization of People of Indian Origin. It started in 1989 with an annual convention. At that time, the Bajpayee government had given all-out support. You would be surprised. It was the BJP who had formed this GOPIO body. It was the BJP who had supported, the global movement of the Pravasis when it came up. But now it is the same BJP government under a different leader, which is just undoing what has been done before. So you see,
Mishra ji, yeah, I just want to say that the current government seems to be eroding many of the institutional structures. So not just the Pravasi structures, but across the board. So what's happened to the Pravasi, let's say, institutional framework, that's a natural development in the current government sort of modus operandi. But I want to just pivot, because we're actually going to be closing the session soon, maybe in about 10 minutes. So I want to really pivot with one.
Can I just
sure.
on the GOPIO issue? Because in the recent time, I know that GOPIO was started with for the engagement of the Pravasi, but in the recent time, we have also witnessed that Gopio has gone on towards a very right-wing Hindutva narrative as well, which needs to be acknowledged. So it doesn't really represent the diversity of India anymore, although it might pitch itself to be an Indian organization of the overseas Indians, but it's not really representing of either the progressive ideas or the diversity of the nation. So yeah, that's all.
Yeah, and that goes to the comment I sent to the panelists as well about that. But just to say my final sort of set of questions for everybody, and have we just lost one of the panelists, or oh no, I thought we lost Shawintala. Sorry, you're still here. So just a final question I have is, so what, in terms of the future, the present and the future of India, in terms of people's movements, in terms of democratization, strengthening democratic frameworks, what would you say is sort of your prognosis in terms of both the diaspora outside India and sort of lending its in, and here I specifically want to make mention of the progressive Indian diaspora. There's a progressive wing of the diaspora that's deeply concerned about the erosion of institutional frameworks that have been built in independent India for the past 70 years, the erosion of those frameworks, and what is going to happen with sort of a more people's movement where the people themselves challenge the government in a way and say, look, you're not meeting our needs. We need to have a different form of, sustainable development. Neoliberal, capitalist, corporate development is not serving our needs. So what do you think is the sort of way forward, if you will? Thank you. Bedo, would you like to start, or?
Sure. I can start on that. I think there are lots of these issues. I think the first point I want to make is that, as I said, there is an official India, and then there are Indian people. And I think over a period of time, what has become very, very clear is that their interests have kind of diverged. Just as within India, the official India's interests, which, if I may say, since you use the word neoliberal, official India is there, with due respect to Ambassador Mishra, since he was part of the official India as well. Official India's, by and large, interest was to further the interests of the minority of handful of super rich. That's been the case. It's not that it started with Prime Minister Modi. This has been the case with official India, and I think we got to realize that. Of course, under the current ruling dispensation, things have become far worse. But it's not that it started there. It started far before that. All problems of this country, say of the US, didn't start with President Trump. It started long before that. Of course, he made it worse. It's the same kind of situation. So once we kind of recognize that the official India and the interests of Indian people are often at loggerheads, I think the question of using some official, or expect that officials are going to lay the groundwork for us to do organizing, is foolhardy. They're not going to do that. We have to do it ourselves. And as I agree with Ambassador Mishra, it's a very uphill battle, and we have been waging this battle. And I think only point I was making is that it's important to go away from the narratives that is set by the powers that be. For instance, this Hindu-Muslim narrative. And let me say how I say this. Of course, there are right now in India, a lot of people their rights are getting attacked, whether we are talking about this activists or intellectuals or academia or press or Muslims or various minorities. But I think it's important to go away from the narrative of posing the problem of India as Hindu versus Muslim problem. I think we can go to everybody, whether they're of Hindu persuasion or Muslim persuasion or whatever persuasion, and say that, look, let's go away from those. Those are diversionary issues. Those are used to actually take us away from what ails us. And on that basis, talk about, as I said, the interests of people. And end with one last point, which Anubandh made, is that it's also important that we are not looking at this as in a ghettoized way. I mean, I think we didn't get into this topic in a bigger way, which is that like I live in the US, I have to be part of this polity as well. And on that basis, we would actually connect these struggles together, because the struggles of, say, farmers in this country, as you know, we're making a documentary which Rajshik is also a part of, I mean, integral part of, will show you that their struggles are not that different from the struggles of Indian farmers in India. And once that happens, that actually opens up a space in a way that goes far beyond this thinking whether there is a Pravasi Divas happening or not happening. I mean, we couldn't care less if there is a Pravasi Divas. We should go forge ahead and clear up the space of ideas and build unity amongst us on the basis of what hurts Indian people and what they're doing to move that forward. Let me make one more point, that this farmers' struggle is being portrayed that it's only the Punjabis or Sikhs who are funding it. Why should it be the case? Me as a Bengali, the reason I want to do this documentary is to say that this is an Indian problem. This is not a Sikh or a Punjabi problem. We ourselves have to be very broad-based, not look at a problem in a narrow way. I think as soon as we fall into these small, self-serving, narrow identities, the less we would be successful in building a broad coalition. Because let me point out one very important thing. This government is not a Hindu government. If this government were a Hindu government, Hindus would be prospering. Tell me how many Hindus are prospering. India today ranks 129 out of 177 countries in Global Hunger Index. Do you think those are not Hindus who are dying out of hunger in India? And that should be our approach, that we start from what ails Indian people, not on the basis of fragmented identities.
Thank you. Thank you. I do want to ask Shawintala to pick up on that, and maybe can you connect it a bit, being an EU citizen, the EU citizens of Indian diaspora. I wanted to just talk about this EU-India summit and just pivot that question before we close this panel completely. That how can the diaspora in Europe actually help to strengthen people's movements and democracy in India? Thank you.
I think it would be important to realize that being proud of your Indian roots or ancestry, it doesn't mean that we have to agree with everything the Indian government or the Indian media is telling us. I think it would be important that the Indian spirit is not about following the governor. No, the Indian spirit is about respecting all religions, like fighting against injustice. I think that the Indian diaspora, it would be better to focus on those ideals which are about peace, which are about equality. And maybe would also be an idea to connect to human rights organization, to social reform movements in India itself. Because I know that many people from the Indian diaspora, especially from the Suriname Hindustani diaspora, they are not aware of what is happening in India. I have heard people say like, no, the caste system is not anymore in India, it is just in the rural areas. Or they think that there is no Islamophobia, these things. But if we would connect to social reform movements in India itself, and then have a dialogue with each other, and then see how we can move towards the solutions, I think that would be the way, actually. And that was also my question to Dr. Malay Mishra, because he said that we cannot change. I think that you said we cannot bring a change to India, but I was actually wondering, because many people from the Indian diaspora, they are very worried about what is happening in India. And besides connecting to social reform movements in India, in what way can we contribute to a better democracy in India? I can't hear you.
Can I give a small point here with your permission, Nidhi? I didn't mean that the diaspora was so helpless to help India at this point of time. They are not. They are not. They are very powerful. They're very strong. They are very well placed in their respective societies, and they are acting as a super pressure group wherever they are. In fact, many of our government decisions have been supported by the Indian American diaspora in India very clearly. The biggest example is our nuclear agreement in 2008. It was out and out supported by the Indian American diaspora, who went across the board in mobilizing the respective representatives in the Congress and other places, and in taking up the Indian case, because India at that time was deemed a pariah in the nuclear world. And that completely changed the discourse after that agreement was signed between India and America. So diaspora is a potent factor. What I'm saying is, at this point, as I look at the situation in India, and I started in the beginning saying that I am in India, you are outside of India. So there is something between us, kind of a geographical distance. You may not be able to understand the poignancy of the moment which I am describing to you. You may not, in Netherlands, you may still be relating from a distance. It is right. You can relate to the social reform movements in India. But what I would suggest more and more, why don't you build a greater solidarity among the global Indian diaspora, wherever you are, all over the world. Now, the global Indian diaspora is seen everywhere in the world, be it small, be it big, industrialized, industrializing, poor, rich, anywhere and everywhere the Indian diaspora is. Can somebody in America or in Europe take the lead in preparing for a big movement, like Dr. Pine said, and very well said, that the spaces have to be now filled up, where you take issues and you don't go into groups. You don't go into groups. For example, the issue is, how do you help support the marginalized in India? At this point of time, more than 85% of India's population is extremely poor. They are extremely poor, 85%. They are living hand to mouth. Now, this is an issue of poverty. How do you support them? How do you help them? Make some social reform movement among yourselves and see how you can support them by maybe through the internet, through the media of your countries, fill up, and through intellectual discussion. And I would also, to the organizers of the summit, why don't you hold such summits, very periodically, regularly, and check the progress of the diaspora, how they have been doing that. And maybe if you want, I can come in and, give a point of view from India, as you are from the diaspora. Why don't you do that? Why only during this India-EU summit that you should have it? Why not on a regular basis? And have it on a quarterly or
I would like to intervene
basis.
there. I would like to intervene there. A lot of the organizers who are now organizing this summit, including myself, we were not active part of the diaspora, to be honest, for a very long time. And we started being an active part only 2019 onwards, after the CEA reforms happened. And since then, we have tried our best to organize summits like this. And this is actually a result of that mobilization. And we hope to continue organizing summits like this in year after year in different parts of the world as well. So yes.
No, what I mean is, you have it in different parts of the world. Do it on a regular basis, regular, maybe quarterly or half yearly, there was a question which was raised, I think, by Dr. Beda, that are we going to see this trend, this Modi hyper-nationalism and building as anti-Modi, as anti-national, that narrative, are we going to see it forever and ever? I say no, we are not. Because, Indian people can't be taken for a ride forever. No. I think Bengal has shown the way, and it will lead definitely to some kind of a political change. It may not bring the required social change, and that has to be worked on. But politically, the system in India may lead to a change, because Mr. Modi is not immortal or not infallible. His system will go, and Indian people will revolt at some time or the other within India. So I think we have to be optimistic about the future. And in the meantime, build your solidarity networks, build your networks, of different kinds of networks, build among yourselves, and go along with the work you have been doing, the good work which you have been doing. And one day, whether you are recognized or not, that doesn't matter. As you very clearly said, PBD or no PBD doesn't matter. PBD is just an occasion to come together and, just make, merry and give each other a slap on the back. But that doesn't matter. You do your work, and at some point of time, it will come of use to the people of India. And that is what we need, I think.
Yeah, if I may add just quickly, as one of the co-organizers as well. So Ritu is right that this is our first big event. So far we have been doing ad hoc donations, Twitter storms, protests, letters to embassies. But this idea really has evolved. And this is our beginning, and we really need suggestions. We also have plans, for example, to make it more regular, but as well as also more diversified, have perhaps panels in English, not just in English, but other European languages, other Indian languages, it's a beginning. So we really look forward to your cooperation and participation.
Anuband, I would like to invite the panelists to just stay on, and we can continue in a format after the recording. Like, we don't have to record the rest of it, but I just want to thank everybody, and I really want to thank Ritu, Anuband, and Raj Taraftar here, who've provided invaluable, and Snehal also, who provided invaluable logistic support for this. And thank you. And this is their brainchild. I am just on as a moderator. I was roped in at the last minute. But I hope we can all of you stay on for another 5-10 minutes? Just, is that okay?
One comment before we finish the recording, just one.
Sure.
We're talking about, making it permanent and all that. Let's not forget there is also this group called Gadar, which has been, and many of you are part of it, has been uniting people from all over the world. And I think that's the kind of organizing that I'm talking about, which is a people-based, it's focused on people's interests. It doesn't care what the official India is doing or whether it's helping it and so on, but it's actually becoming a force. And I think Rajesh can talk about it in a bigger way, a force of uniting people of Indian origin and link it to the struggles that are going on in India.
Yes, I kind of agree very much with what Bedabrata has said over here, that and what Anuband also said, that this is just a beginning for us. And as a diaspora, as a progressive diaspora, we are here to stay for a very long run. And with this, I would like you to invite come for the next panel, which will start tomorrow. We will have a fireside conversation with Member of Parliament of Netherlands, Nilofer Gundogan. She will be with us at 9:30 in the morning. Thanks for watching today, and I wish you a good evening.
Thank you.